Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, fellow citizens of Work from Home, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us and welcome. This is 100 Hour Launchpad CEO Challenge number 9. May I ask each one of you to please join me? Let us begin by uniting in a moment of silence. We honor the men and women of our front lines. They are represented today on your screens in a special way, in a sacred way, by the doctors who have given their lives. Their names are flashed on screen. Friends, as I invite you back, if we can stay here a moment. These doctors gave their lives fighting in our medical front lines. I submit, ladies and gentlemen, that we too, you and I, have our own front lines in this global pandemic. To you and I, a battlefront is entrusted. To you and I, a slice of humanity is entrusted. It is our duty to serve. Consider this. If you open your minds, if you open your eyes and your hearts, you will surely find a battlefront, a front line that you alone can fight in your own unique way. What is your front line? You will see that 100 Hour Launchpad is very much about this question. What calls you to action and impact? For us here in Ignite House, we have always served business leaders like you in the areas of growth, innovation, and above all, igniting people and teams to their greatest promise. Friends, many have argued with me that growth and innovation are beyond reach in this time of great crisis, that we should yield instead to the most basic need for survival. I would rather argue with my actions. Growth and innovation was our focus in peacetime. In this time of war, our Ignite frontline is no different, only 3 times more intense. We are here to help leaders fulfill 3 mission-critical duties. Mission-critical if we are to survive, and mission-critical if we are to grow. I see no distinction. These 3. First, refocus. We help leaders keep their people and teams focused. At a time of fear, panic, paralysis, the world needs teams who can refocus on what they do best. Second, beyond focus, reorganize. When all that is familiar is lost, all that is comfortable is lost, all that is business as usual is unusual, we need teams who can reorganize and get back to what they do best. And third, act fast. Specifically, we help leaders and their teams mobilize solutions quickly, from idea to launch in days. Because think about it. Failure of business leaders in these 3 areas, refocus, reorganize, and mobilizing solutions fast, whether it is in supply chain or product or distribution or operations or customer service, or even marketing and sales. Business failures make life even more miserable for millions of us every day. So that is why we are here in 100 Hour Launchpad. We are, again, on our 9th episode ever since this lockdown started. In every one of them, we have challenged ourselves, along with our guests, people like you, to identify burning needs and screaming wants all across your value chain. What are your opportunities that demand zero to market fast? So we are here. Let us begin today's CEO challenge entitled Me Inc. in the new normal. I am your host, Andre Yap, founder and CEO of Ignite House of Innovations, home of innovators. I must confess, I have enjoyed every one of these CEO challenges a little bit too much. I believe you will too. Along with me, please welcome my co-host, the one and only Miguel Aranaz, managing partner of Ignite House.
Thank you, Andre. Good afternoon to everyone who's here with us today.
Good afternoon, Miguel. Accompanying us, Karen Lopez will lead our magnificent backstage team. Houston, can we have our launch pad, please? We are T minus 100 hours from liftoff. So if you're following on your screen, we have a series of materials for you to follow. Again, you should pin your screen to Ignite House presentations on your upper right-hand menu. So this is the 100-hour series. It's presented by Ignite House of Innovation, home of innovators. We are in that unique, or if you want, weird nexus of corporate, in that we work with big companies, innovation. We also work with fast-moving startups and visionary founders. Venture capital, in that we invest our own funds in innovation. And above all, our core and deepest passion is to ignite human beings, people, teams, and organizations to fulfill their greatest potential. You will get a taste of exactly what that means in our time together today. So, next slide. We have two versions of this 100-hour challenge. Right now, you are in the open door challenge, which happens every Tuesday and Thursday at this time. On the right-hand side, you have the closed door challenge. So for example, last Friday, we were jamming with the fintech group of Union Bank. That was fun. The closed door challenge, exclusive to an organization. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the goal of these challenges is twofold. Number one, to jumpstart ideas into living, breathing innovations. So action. Second, and I would say far more important, is to practice, practice, practice. The science of going from idea to market fast. When we say 100 hours, that's not to be taken literally. Some innovations will require 2 times or 10 times those hours. Some will require less. The point is being well practiced in the discipline of sprinting as fast and agile as we can. Today, watch out for it, we will encounter the 4 RS, the 4 restart streams that will be especially relevant in restarting our companies back to peak performance. Now, peak performance, we define here in Ignite as being able to continuously map opportunities no matter what is happening all around us. And indeed, based on what is happening all around us. And then sprinting these opportunities to market fast. That to us is peak performance. A lot goes into it, and we will experience it in these next hours. So how does it work? Next slide, please. Our 100-hour challenge begins with these first 2 hours over Google Meets. Our goal here is to jumpstart the sprint. The middle of your screen, the rest of the sprint and launch sequence happens on the 100-hour Launchpad app. That's when you take ideas jump-started from here or in some random place after, like the shower or when you're cooking up dinner. And then you take this idea and you reform into smaller self-driven teams using the Launchpad app. You can do this as a corporate team, in smaller business units, business teams, or as independent venture teams. So the Launchpad app is a step-by-step process aided by collaborative algorithms to guide you in sprinting through 8 hurdles so you and your teams can launch fast in the new normal. Lastly, for funding, we are happy to invest in independent ventures and to co-invest if you are a corporate venture. Our criteria is simple. You should meet the 8 hurdles of the 100-hour Launchpad. let's get started with the flow of this webcast. Next slide, please. You won't see it on screen, but I can spell it out for you. F-U-N, fun. We will focus in these 2 hours on the first 5 fun hurdles, which are highlighted in blue. Primarily, we will be zeroing in on zones of opportunity and then how to get the sprint going instead of overthinking, overmeeting, overplanning, and frankly, overdoing and overbuilding too many things. So the notion of minimum viable product, sprinting to MVP, we will experience that also today. So how exactly do you and I have fun? Let me introduce our cast and cadence. First, with respect to the 5 hurdles, we will all do solo workouts. So we will be given 5 minutes to do our solo workouts based on prompts. After that, we will start a peer exchange by hearing from our guest collaborators. We have 3 of them today, and one of them is invited back from last week when we had a Jobs Ventures, and she is joined by 2 others. We will be hearing from them first to start off our peer exchange. And then after that, we will open up our peer exchange to the broader audience. After we've heard zones of opportunities from each other, we get to put in our iterated response, and then we go from there. So it's time for the next slide. And it's ready, set, go. The question is, if you were to launch something today, it could be a venture, a project, an initiative, or a pivot, what would be your top priority given market needs and opportunities in the new normal? So, to get us started on our adventure today, we have, please welcome Miguel Arenaz. Miguel?
Thank you, Andre. Okay, so as Andre mentioned a while ago, I will start off with mapping our opportunities. Specifically, we'll all be doing a solo workout. Now, what I mean by solo workout, basically, we'll give you a few minutes to answer some of the prompts that will show on screen. In this particular, it's zero in on the opportunity. Okay, so I would suggest maybe grab a piece of paper, or you can type things on your phone if you want. But basically, we want you to answer these prompts and questions. Okay, and just to give you an idea of what we mean by this, we'll start off first by describing who the target stakeholder is for you that would benefit from our project. Then, once you've identified who the target stakeholder is, you want to now understand what are their pain points, what are the possible opportunities that you can solve for based on what you know about your stakeholder. And then lastly, what type of impact do you want to have in their lives? In this case, we use the from to format, meaning simply state from, referring to the current state that your stakeholders are in, to refers to the desired state that you want them to get into. Now, one thing to keep in mind, right, is that we're only giving you 5 minutes, okay? You don't have to overthink this, but try to make sure that you focus on your stakeholder and really try to understand what pain points can you address with a solution that we'll be coming up with later. Again, as Andre has mentioned, our guest collaborators will also be answering this, and so will everyone else in the webcast. Do you want to add anything, Andre?
Yeah, thank you, Miguel. So 2 things. First of all, the zone of opportunity today is particularly focused on the topic of Me Inc. This is our shorthand between us and our guest collaborators for the broader topic of in the new normal, with our work lives and our career tracks potentially very disrupted. How does one take care of themselves and put themselves on track to be their own brand to be, whether they are employed or self-employed, to be masters of their own destiny. So all of this is captured by Me Inc. When you consider this topic, then we want you to ask these three questions. Who's your target stakeholder? Who's the human being you want to help? And then secondly, what is the pain points, the target opportunity with regards to those human beings? And then express your Delta statement. We highly encourage you. Miguel and I have done this over and over again, not just in the context of a 100-hour launchpad, but in the course of our work, whether it's to launch our own ventures here in Ignite or to help our corporate clients and customers launch their ventures. We need to focus on these. Very often, ladies and gentlemen, the temptation is to leapfrog into ideas. All right? Miguel and I will haul you back to these three questions if you start talking to us about your business solutions. We want to understand first the problem, opportunity, and stick to that first as our jump off point for the launchpad. Are we ready, Miguel?
Yep, we are.
All right,
Aaron?
you each have 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Counters there. Enjoy.
Okay, so we have about 2.5 minutes left. 2.5 minutes left.
60 seconds. Okay, last 30 seconds. As we're winding down, for those of you, again, the screen will become very important in the next few minutes. So for those of you who are still not following us on screen, please drop the menu down on the upper right-hand corner, the one with people, and then pin it to Ignite House presentations. So we are done. You should be following, you should be seeing me on screen. Okay, right now, what we said was we did promise a peer exchange right after. We're going to just go into a 5-minute segment that will be very enriching for you guys. I just want to simulate for you how these questions mattered on the ground in reality by giving you a very quick case study. Houston, can we go to 100hours.vc, please? Okay, so this site, even this idea of 100hours.vc, from the start, please, from the top, did not exist as of March 15, before the lockdown happened. As soon as the lockdown happened, we knew we had to respond and stay relevant. So in this very platform that we're on, 100 Hours Launchpad, was born from that. So this story catalogs, this site, in a sense, catalogs everything that has happened in the 40 or so days of the enhanced community quarantine. If we scroll down, you can see 9 milestones. And these are breakthroughs that we've launched, all 100% free, such as what you're experiencing right now, basically as part of our commitment to help leaders lead in a time of Corona. Some of those milestones are there. So I will take you through, including 100-hour Launchpad, which we launched on day 5 from the time we committed. So that was March 18. Okay. I will now take you through a point of relevance, one of these milestones. If we could go to 30 days, please. 30 days of growth and transformation. Okay. One of the applications that we launched, I will take you through that now. Could we go to I Am Iggy, please, Houston? All right, so here is an app available at iamiggy.app. I don't suggest you go there, but you can follow on screen. If you look at GPS navigation, stop number 2, GPS navigation. All right, if we can go to forward 3 screens ahead. Okay, we are now going to talk about very briefly about this notion of GPS. In Ignite, it's Genius Purpose Service, or simply GPS. If we know our GPS, then we have our own deeply personal navigation system for life. GPS will continuously lead us where we need to go, who we are called to be, for whom. It does not matter what success we achieve in life. Our path to joy and meaning and impact goes through GPS, but only if we pay attention. Waze, for example, remember Waze? Waze cannot help if we're not listening. It's the same with this notion of GPS, Genius Purpose Service. Every day we are revealed new data points and coordinates, new pieces of our own puzzle, new threads on the tapestry of I, new stars on the constellation of who am I, why am I here, what was I born to do, what am I called to solve right now. So I will show you 2 prompts. We can go to the prompts. Prompt number 2, and I would ask you to dwell on these questions very briefly. You may answer them in writing or not. The first question is number 2 here. Life as we know it can change so drastically in only a few hours, days, or weeks. The world has so many new needs in our new normal. What can I give? What is it in me that is good, that is gifted, that remains in me no matter how much the world changes, that will allow me to stay relevant and keep being a force for good? Yesterday, tomorrow, today, for many tomorrows after. So let's dwell on this question for, let's say, a minute. What are the images and keywords that come to you when you consider this question? What is it in me that is good, that is gifted, that remains in me no matter how much the world changes, that allows me to stay relevant and keep being a force for good? Yesterday, today, tomorrow, and for many tomorrows after. We won't literally take a minute, but go ahead, just let it sink in. Let it permeate your consciousness, if you will. Okay, that's the first of 2 questions. The second question, Houston, if we could scroll down to question number 7. And I'd like to invite the audience to dwell on this again. What pains, the first question is about gifts. This time it's about pains. What pains have I encountered most meaningfully in my own life? How have my pains been a gift? Because they allowed me to care deeply. That is, how have my pains moved me to empathy, knowing the pain of others? How have my pains moved me to compassion, knowing the pain of others, and so wanting to act on it? How have my pains moved me to love, knowing the pain of others, and so wanting to give the very best in myself to heal their pain? So as with the first question, I invite you for the next 60 seconds to just soak this question up. The answers don't have to be literal or explicit in your mind. Let it sink into you and embrace it, whether it comes to you in images, in keywords, or even in prompting more questions to you. Trust us on this. Soak this question up. What are your pains that have been gifts in your life because they have allowed you to care deeply? Very well. That, ladies and gentlemen, ends our brief visit into the kingdom of GPS, Genius Purpose Service. As brief as that visit was, only less than 5 minutes, we want now to revisit. At the bottom right-hand corner of my screen, there is a timer. We are now down to an hour and a half left in this Launchpad session. Before we hear from each other for our peer exchange, I would like to take you back to the map of the zones of opportunity. Houston. On screen. The map of the zones of opportunity. Okay, you remember these three questions. Now, having gone through the GPS, the Genius Purpose and Service Discernment, which admittedly was very fast tracked, usually we take a lot longer with that. I would like to invite you to take just 2 minutes to revisit these questions and consider whether or how your answers might have changed or might have been emphasized. Again, give yourselves to this exercise. Revisit with all honesty and sincerity and candidness these three questions. We will give you 2 minutes.
Later na yung sabihin pa.
Yan yung tatanungin ko rin.
Yeah, well.
Mommy, I can't follow the Papa's Gmail.
Why?
We have 60 seconds left. Here we go. Winding down, last 10 seconds. Here we go. So now it's time for the much awaited guest collaborators. We're going to hear from them. In another universe, we would refer to them as our panel of experts. In Ignite, though, we don't like panels and we don't like experts. We asked you to do solo workouts, each one of us, to begin with, because whether it's growth, innovation, or restart, survival mode, the most important thing is that each of us brings our whole selves into what we're doing. So that's why we started not with our experts, not with myself, but with your solo workouts. Now propped up by our experience with GPS. So let us now hear from our panel. If I may ask, let's pick up where we left off, shall we? Kathleen, welcome back to 100-Hour Launchpad. Thank you for gracing us again with your presence. I truly enjoyed having you the last time. You know how this show works.
Yeah.
Our topic is Me Inc., and we want to hear from you about the three questions. What is your zone of opportunity in terms of who your target stakeholders are that you want to help if you were to launch a venture today? What would their pain points be? And what's your vision of impact? Please.
Sure. Thank you, Andre. Glad to be here. Actually, the biggest opportunity I see, and one that this pandemic has really exposed is the opportunity to look at vulnerable populations like the elderly, the immunocompromised, and really look at solutions that can help them level up the quality of life that they're experiencing today and in the pandemic versus what they can experience in the future. So I'm looking at solutions like telemedicine, or really tools that are more proactive as opposed to reactive in terms of diagnosing and looking at the condition of these vulnerable populations and seeing how you can help them.
Kathleen, interesting. Um, uh, when did you experience personally? Did you have personal encounters with? You mentioned the elderly, the immunocompromised. It's interesting that you could you give us a little bit of background as to why you zeroed in on this stakeholder in particular.
Um, I have a neighbor currently who's unable to move around a lot because he's having challenges with his health, and his thinking is really about better safe than sorry. So basically I took the opportunity to get to know him, understand more. I mean, I've been living in my unit for like close to 4 years, but this was the first time I had the chance to really talk to him and figure out what his concerns and his background was, and basically it led me to helping him out with groceries every other week when he needed it. And what I realized is this person looks healthy normally, but he has an invisible condition that actually makes him more vulnerable to dying or having an adverse effect. And normally this condition isn't a disadvantage, but in this situation it is. And a lot of the times when things like this pandemic happen, it really exposes those kinds of inequities to us. It makes us realize that, there are these situations, there are people who are used to living with this standard, and not a lot of attention is paid to helping and figuring out solutions for those kinds of people. Yeah.
Kathleen, you're a very smart woman. How do you, and I know you've made a career, let's say in your day job, of around the topic of human resources, human capital, maximizing peak performance. How do you relate this insight of yours or this problem that and this stakeholder that you're being drawn to today's topic of Me Inc.? Are you able to reflect on what is personal to you in your having chosen this target stakeholder, and how it relates to maybe many other people's experiences potentially of how they start carving out this thing called Me Inc.?
For me, Inc. is really fundamentally about people creating and shaping the job opportunities and the growth opportunities around them, as opposed to just waiting for jobs to come back, waiting for the economy to turn around. Me Inc. is essentially for me about taking back control of a person's value and the person's ability to create that value and how they can deliver that value to others. And a lot of it is really driven by mindset, like how do you be gritty, how can you empathize with the needs of others, how do you understand problems that you see around you, as well as looking at ways to take the risks that you need to develop something that creates value for others, because at the end of the day, when you think about doing business well and doing business effectively, it's really about how you deliver value to someone who needs it. And it's about looking at opportunities not as something that happens to you, but as you making things happen around you.
So I want to zero in on two things that you brought up. Number one is Me Inc. Sometimes we over emphasize it as just being in business, right, for yourself or
Yes.
being an entrepreneur, but not necessarily the case. Now you can have and live out Me Inc. Do you think in the context of still being employed?
Yes.
Yes, very
And
good. So we agree on that because the defining characteristic of Me Inc. is not whether you're self-employed as an entrepreneur or you're employed by somebody else. It is, as you said, number one, the ability to continuously create value for somebody who needs it, right?
yes.
And I want to draw on something else you said, which is has been the core of our solo workout so far, which is empathy. You can't create value for somebody if you do not first have empathy for what their needs, wants, and aspirations and pains are. Correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So I would say then that one of the core competencies of being in Me Inc. is continuously having an antenna or a radar screen, if you will, of being alive to the people and pains around us, right? Because
Yeah.
that's the point by which we could draw relevance. So when you consider now, I mean, I love your target stakeholder of the old people, the immunocompromised, and I particularly I'm grateful to have heard how you came about that, the personal encounter. I certainly have experienced having lived in a place for many years, and this pandemic is what it took to make me know my neighbors. So I can relate to what you were saying. Now,
Yeah.
leaving that aside, Kathleen, when you think about what we just incited in the last 2 minutes, which is if you took 100 people who were employed or self-employed right now, and what they really need to get good at is empathy, compassion, and then being able to translate that into creating value for others, that being Me Inc.
Mhm.
What venture would you start to foster Me Inc. in the marketplace right now, where if you look at it from a supply and demand perspective, no, Kathleen, there is so much demand in a sense for Me Inkers, right? But the supply of them, I think you would agree, is way short. So demand is up here and supply of Me Inc. is down here. So that's a market opportunity that demands market solutions. What venture would you start in order to foster in the marketplace new Me Inkers? Maybe we'll park that question for a while because that's not a fair question. That's a second level question already. We'll park that with you for a while, and we'll circle back with you. We'll hear from our other panelists to begin with. Thank you very much. You set the stage very nicely for us, Kathleen. Okay, next, can we call on the very interestingly named gentleman, Genesis? So Genesis, same question to you.
Yeah.
In the context of Me Inc. Marketplace for supply and demand, I don't know what you zeroed in as your zone of opportunity in terms of target stakeholders, their pain points, and your. Could you share with us a little bit? Also, I don't know. I'm curious if you had any change of heart or change of mind or change of focus when we detoured into the GPS exercise. Please share with us your where you are.
All right. Andre, I'm an educator by heart. So I do believe, like, in order for us to, generations to survive in post-pandemic or year after year, like our young students and even the college students right now should be equipped with this values that we are pushing right now as we discuss this Me Incorporated. Way back when I was in college, like in terms of me, I used to grow in a province from Mindanao, and I studied at Mindanao State University as a scholar, but the opportunities there are not really the same as the opportunities we are getting here. And it's more of like the perspective of the student. So during the pandemic, I used to give free tutorials to some of the college students online. Like I do mathematics, science, and even some sort of like English, and do free tutor. Then I realized it's more than like what we're going to learn from textbook, but it's more of like coaching and mentorship to our students. So when the pandemic, the quarantine kicks in, I started to talk to some of my friends, like especially in the startup ecosystem, like, hey, do you really want to coach someone about your expertise in personal branding, or you want to coach a student on your expertise in marketing? And these are the things that you cannot just teach in a classroom or in a college perspective. This takes experience, and even like coaching and mentorship are really the essential method in order for you to share this to the students. And imagine if these students already have that type of mindset, like, okay, I've learned from Mr. Roger Colliantes how to be able to thrive during the crisis because I was mentored when I was a student. So this is really the target stakeholders that I'm seeing on this opportunity. Like, because right now, students are just staying at home. And
Sorry, Genesis, could you be more explicit? So who is your target stakeholder?
the students. So these are the college students right now, and even those who are going to, first new job seekers in the industry or in the ecosystem. So there are a lot of things that we can do there. Like we can instill some proper mindset, especially like we are promoting Me Incorporated. Like you cannot just teach compassion and empathy if it's not through coaching and mentorship. Like in order for you to, what do you call this? Share this, like, hey, we need to empathize for this specific sector in the community or something. We need to challenge the students.
Genesis, let me ask you, just so we
Yeah.
can be structured about this. When you talk about your target stakeholder as college students, so we're talking about people in the age group of about 18 to 22.
Yes,
Fresh-
18 to 23. Yeah, fresh graduate students.
Let's keep it structured. What is their pain points? What pain points are you zeroing in on? Before we talk about solutions and what we
All
can
right.
do for them, let's first start with them. I mean, this is the main point of empathy, right? We don't start
Yeah.
with our ideas, solutions. We start with, okay, what are their pains? What are their wants? What are their needs? They're human beings. Who are they, and what do they need?
All right. If you can see, like right now, study shows, like I've seen this in a LinkedIn article, like 87% of the college students right now can say that they are not ready enough in the future. Like they can study or solve algebra, but they're not really equipped, like not just the technical skills, but also the right, what they call this, they labeled it as soft skills, but I believe this is grit and entrepreneurship. Like if these students will be able to learn, because this is not just core solutions that can, like, grasp and study over the internet. It will be instilled to someone through experience. So I do believe like the struggle right now, especially like the quarantine is in period, like the students are not really making use of their time. So we can,
their pain point, if I'm hearing you right, is that they're not prepared, they're not maximizing their time or their talents, they're not prepared for the marketplace, correct?
yeah, they're not prepared for the marketplace. They're not ready for the current competitive world and even the future.
Okay, so then what is your delta statement from statement to statement, which is your vision of impact? Could you share that with us, please?
So the impact right now is like from being just unprepared students to future ready students and future ready employees and entrepreneurs in the future. So that's the impact that I would like to see. and I would
Okay.
like to impart with.
So that brings us to the topic now of Me Inc., right?
Yeah.
We're talking about being future ready. Okay, so we know that your heart is there. I'm grateful for your sharing for now. We'll leave it at that. We'll circle back to you. And
All right.
now we'll go to our esteemed guest, Mr. Roger Poliantes. Roger, welcome to Ignite 100 Hour Launchpad. You know the drill by now. If you could give us your sense of the opportunities that you see in this marketplace of the new normal. But in particular, if you could talk to us about the three questions: who are the target stakeholders? What are their pains, and what is the vision of impact that you foresee? And if you could do that as one of our esteemed guests, by way also of giving us context in terms of what about your background and life experiences have led you to zero in on these target stakeholders and on these target pains. So Roger. Roger? Reminder to
There you go.
your mic. There you go.
Yeah. First of all, Andre, thank you for having us here. As this is my first time to be with you, but I like to say that I've been watching the previous episodes, and I'm really surprised and impressed by the way ideas are generated. And as a accelerator, my background is actually I'm an angel investor, and I'm a startup coach. So I invest just like you in startups. As angel investor, I bring in advice, network, and so on. And the challenge for me is I have a whole portfolio of businesses. And so our challenge during COVID was, do we wait after COVID until everything settles down? Or do we act now while in COVID? So I challenge my team with our founders in our portfolio. And my challenge to them is, how do we show the grit genome that we have in this time of pandemic? Because I reminded them that in this crisis, there are actually two types of people. I hope you don't mind, I'll give a context. First is those who are ready for the crisis because they're doing quite well. There are industries and startups like that. And those who were not yet there, they were not doing well, meaning they probably don't have a market yet. They probably, after minimum viable product, they're waiting for the next investment, the next bootstrap, and then pandemic came. So I reminded them about these four grid that we used in my company.
Sorry, Roger.
Mm.
Roger,
Yes.
just for the benefit of our audience, because we're coming from many different walks of life. A lot are in corporate, no? You and I might be the handful that are familiar with terminologies like portfolio companies and stuff like that. So let's make this easier on everybody by, can you be more explicit at this point? Who is your target stakeholder when you're defining your zone of opportunity? I think I'm hearing from you, but you should correct me if I'm wrong, that your target stakeholder is your founders, your portfolio of founders. Is that right?
No, actually, I was not going there. But in answer to your question, I was going to answer the question of, as an investor founder with some companies already with me, what do I see is the window of opportunity. So then I went to the process which you suggested, which is the target stakeholder, target opportunity, and impact. Okay,
Yes.
so there are three that we identified as very challenged stakeholders. One, not in the order. How do we help these LGU enforcers of ECQ who are dealing with crowds of people and they're supposed to maintain social distance? but they don't have the tool to be able to do the job well. So that for me is a stakeholder I immediately saw, because the ECQ was developed quickly in response to the crisis. So suddenly we're on a lockout, and then people are supposed to check people, they're supposed to check whether they're following curfew, social distance. The only problem is they did not have tools to do that. So that for me was my biggest question was, how can we help them?
Here you're talking specifically about law enforcers, for example.
Barangay.
Barangay, okay. Barangay, yes.
No,
Okay, barangay.
LGU, mga tanod, okay? So, I mean, I'm a simple guy. I need to say, during this crisis, who are the most hit? So, and then I'll tell you the response that we did, okay? Because then number two, I hope you don't mind. Number two is the work from home mothers who were expecting to have connection with their kids, and then suddenly being thrown in a position where schools are closed, but their kids are restless because education and learning is still open. So how do you handle that? So I said, okay. Number three, we have millennials who are stuck at home because of social distancing, but they're all bored with this food panda, all this, unnutritious food. What I said is, what if we give them some gourmet thing that they can use to connect with their other friends? And using this concept of social e-commerce, how can we blow up that industry during crisis and make them talk to each other, give things to each other using social media? So those were my three stakeholders. So which one do you want me to handle? I'll do one by one. I follow your.
I think, Roger, thank you for those. I think I have to say to you, kudos to you, because those are very well grounded. We can almost touch these human beings.
Yeah.
In some cases, they're right here in the certainly the second case is right here at home. No, the challenges of working from home because you're home but not really home, and balancing family life. So we're well aware of that. I would throw the question back to you and ask that we focus on one zone of opportunity, and it is up to you who you feel most called to serve.
Okay. I would say I'll start with the parents, work from home.
Thank you.
Because it will end in a good story if I tell you what happened. Crisis is really open up opportunities. So I run preschools. It's called Mind Champs International Preschool. It's a neuroscience-based preschool. I have 5 schools. They're doing very well before crisis. The problem is when the COVID came and the lockdown, none of my teachers were ready to respond because they were trained in the progressive classroom-based brick and mortar. Now my challenge is, how do I turn them in 60 hours to become virtual teachers and become online teachers, and not just copying and sending YouTube videos? Those are two different things. The reason why parents don't like distance learning is we are ruining the concept of distance learning. The online is different from virtual, from interactive, real education. So what I told my teachers was, this was the challenge. This is a bit cheating because it's already finished. I told them, you have only 3 days. Let's work from home. Let's design a curriculum that brings the classroom into the television, that brings that interaction where you're very famous for, where the kids interact with themselves, socialization, where the onus is not on the parents. I said, it's unfair to charge them the same fee when we're asking them to do what we're supposed to do. So that was my 60 hours challenge. And guess what? We came out with our own unique distance learning program, which is using Google Meets, Zoom, using puppetry, using ballet. We teach ballet, Zumba. We created a curriculum which makes the child so engaged. And this is the most important thing I learned. The teacher has to be there. The one who taught me in the school should be the one who will teaching me in virtual. And this is where I think this is where many fail, because they think it's a matter of aggregating so many kids, sending this, and then giving parents, things to do. So what we came up with, we turned them around, so everybody was Googling about what's the latest approach, what are the 12 most important gadgets or communication tool. Then we also talk about changing the paradigm. So it's now I am a teacher leading the learning in the living room, but mommy is enjoying it with the kid. So we're not gonna burden you. So we give you an assignment that there will be an artwork. We give you care package. We send you the materials so that you can help your kid rather than you having to go out, which you cannot, and look for materials and then follow the instructions. This is what distance learning today is. Follow the instruction, then you give up and say, excuse me, teacher, how do I do this when I'm not supposed to be trained to do this? In fact, by asking a question, how do you suspend your own child in distance learning? Can I dispose of them? So okay, so this is the opportunity, and I leave it at that.
Roger, well, thank you for regaling us with that story. A lot of good lessons there, not just in the story itself, and not just what I mean is not just in the problem itself, but in the process that you went through, no? And we want to dissect that process as we go on with the rest of this show, because I suspect highly that that process is part of this thing we're calling Me Inc. What about that process is repeatable, no? But before we go in there, might I suggest then that your success only breeds more opportunity, because I can only imagine that the problem you set out to solve, which you have, from the sounds of it, very beautifully solved, is probably a problem that hounds many other, when we talk about stakeholders, many other teachers. And because the teachers and their schools fail to translate the experience into learning from home, then the second stakeholder comes in, which is the kids themselves, and the parents also suffer. So in the context of that, there seems to be, or there might be, an opportunity for you to parlay the methods that you have developed in 60 hours. Congratulations, you beat even our 100-hour Lunchpad. Your methodologies, maybe there is some sense in which it can be shared or licensed out or taught to other schools that are teaching other subject matters, but where your methods might be relevant. What do you think, Roger?
Okay, in fact, Andre, and this is the exciting part about this crisis, I didn't realize after my teacher's research, this is actually a big industry, no? There's 2.8 million students in the Philippines. 1.4 are preschool to K1. And there's no one who's really understanding what the so-called digital thing is. And so I came up with this curriculum, and the good news is we have really started up a new venture now. Okay, this is our unique brand. So technically, we are now going from brick and mortar to click and enjoy. So yes, there is a formula, and again, the next 60 hours was turning a group of my teachers to become startups. So I carved out a new group of teachers who now saw the possibility that I can be a Me Inc. I mean, I can be a teacher, but what if I'm also a work from home parent and I want to enjoy my kids while being a teacher? Then they said, this is the answer, Mr. Colliantes. If you're going to open this up, you franchise it, and I can have a small one, and then I can do it from home, and then I get trained. I think this is the future of education, especially preschool education. So, and the funny part was last night I was in discussion with the World Business Angels Forum, And I didn't realize, as you said, the same problem is the problem in Argentina, in Mexico, in Indonesia, in Monaco, in Spain, and I go like, oh, I wasn't thinking of that. But since you're thinking like that, I may start my own franchise, because I think if you find the secret sauce and you're not selfish, I think you can share it. So that is the end of the story. That's why it sounds like a good story, but I can tell you, I give credit to the teachers who were really just challenged. So maybe my other learning is sometimes, I think I heard you say that necessity is the mother of adoption.
Adoption.
Yeah. So my teacher suddenly realized, yeah, I don't know anything about digital. I'm not digital, but why not? I said, why not? Since the market is undefined, do you realize that you're creating your own white space? And whatever you do is your own. So, and they bought to the idea, by the way. So I'm very excited. In fact, I think the lockout should continue.
Okay, well, that's another topic. We'll invite you back so the audience can get mad at you for even suggesting that. But you and I understand each other. Again, kudos to you. No? Kudos to you. The only thing I would agree with you there is that you're not finished. You're only getting started. It's a wonderful opportunity. When you rattled off the names of all those countries, surprising countries, not so surprising countries. But the unsurprising point about this opportunity and its universality is because the classroom, there is something about learning and school that is so deeply ingrained in the human psyche, whether you're Spanish, Mexican, Hong Kongese, or Filipino, or American, that education and schooling needs to take place in the classroom with students seated on desks and teachers on a blackboard. That's so deeply ingrained in us. That's why this is a massive opportunity, because in this time and space that can no longer happen. And by the way, it is congruent with the trajectory, the upwards trajectory. If you look talking about flattening the curve, no? Well, there is a curve that won't be flattened, which is the homeschooling curve that even before this pandemic was already on the up and up. But again, homeschooling is a slightly different model from learning from home using digital as we're talking about it right now.
Correct.
And the wonderful thing is that in the Me Inc. sense, no, one of the cornerstone disciplines I have to believe in Me Inc. is the ability again to empathize with the problem and the people, the human beings who own that problem. In this case, your teachers were the best people to solve it because they were the ones who owned that problem, right? They were used to being in front of the classroom in a blackboard. And that is just such a poorly utilized, poorly drawn out skill in today's day and age. So that if we were to talk about Me Inc. ventures, in other words, ventures that systematically help members of our population become Me Incers, then one of the fundamental 101 classes has to be about empathy, staying awake to the problems and opportunities all around us. So you triggered a lot of thinking, Roger. We're going to go back to you, but now I want to loop back to Kathleen. And now that you've put us squarely in the space of Me Inc., Kathleen, can we call on you again and now go back to you about that question we left with? Right. So let's go back to the target stakeholder, target pain point, and vision of impact. This time, if we were to talk about addressing this supply and demand gap of Me Incers, why is it that in a time and space where we need so many Me Incers, we're not seeing them, and we're so ill-equipped, especially I think as Filipinos, to be Me Incers? And what would you start by way of a target opportunity in this space? Go ahead, Kathleen.
I think I'll start with the story of the last time I went to Hong Kong, way before the pandemic. basically, I was looking for drone parts to build a new robotics build that I was excited about. So I took the train to Shenzhen on the other side of the bay because I heard that that was where the cheap parts were, and people in Hong Kong would be selling it for a markup. And I came across this group of stores, all of them selling technology, basically drone parts, computer chips, and so on. And what I noticed as I went to each store was the technology that each it's basically the equivalent of a sari-sari store for electronics, but the equivalent of what they were
Wow.
selling was very different. Every store had a different innovation on the same board that I was looking for. So you had people who went with this build, that build, and then they modified it a little bit. And what I realized and what I was looking at was really a group of me inkers, but on the surface, they're just ordinary people selling products. But they themselves took charge of their own innovation process, their own development process. And really, as a result, what happened was over time, a lot of what used to be um, the forefront of technology in Hong Kong, the people in Shenzhen basically co-opted that. They developed faster because every person who was selling the electronics on the ground both knew how it worked and they knew how to add value to the piece of technology that they were developing. So you had 20 different innovations, 30 different innovations. But then if it happened in Shenzhen and people were successful because of it, the next question would be, how come we can't have something like this in the Philippines? What's the biggest gap against keeping people, getting people to that level? And personally, I would like to go back to the book that Lee Kuan Yew, the Singaporean leader, cited. So he mentions the Philippines, and the paragraph where he mentions the context of the Philippines has always been very interesting to me. So what he said was Filipinos basically have everything they need to succeed except the motivation. So he believes we're more creative than a lot of Singaporeans, that we have the capacity to think and iterate and improve quickly, that we're highly resilient. But Filipinos basically, according to him, lack the motivation to push something out. Um, and for me, I think that is the biggest value add for creating more me inkers in today's environment. Uh, Finding a way to create and harness a collective motivation for all Filipinos so that they can behave and work and find solutions the way Roger did with his school. That it's not a question of waiting for the right policy to come up or waiting for the right instructions to be pushed out. It's more the idea of once you understand where your value is. So, for example, for me, I'm a data scientist, I have statistics skills. Um, then you look at where can I put my needs, where can I basically deliver the need out, and how can I share that value out. So just an example, I love to cook, and one of the things I'm trying to get set up in my condo unit now is basically a group that exchanges different home cooked meals, so that all of my neighbors on the floor above, floor below, we all get a taste of each other's cooking. So I'm looking at ways where I can share that kind of service with them. or how I can look at an opportunity to really push my skill out there so that more people can get value out of it. Yeah.
Kathleen, great, great. I particularly love your last suggestion as a lover of food myself. What a wonderful idea, no?
Can I add
think
something, Andre?
yes, please, Miguel. Yes.
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, Kathleen, like, I've been to Shenzhen, and I honestly think it's the Wakanda of China. I mean, like, you walk in there, and it's like you just get this access to all things that you can make and build around. So, I mean, I just want to ask you, in terms of like, would you consider yourself more of a thinker or a builder?
I think you need a bit of both. If I'm being honest, I prefer thinking to building, and I'm still working on how I execute. But it's hard to execute without, having the vision of what's my path forward as well. So I'd say I'm probably better at thinking, but working on the execution end.
Yeah. So when you asked a while ago, I mean, like, you go to Shenzhen, and it seems like they seem to be this innovation hub. I've had situations where I've walked in there, and I show up in the morning with an idea. I get some sort of a prototype by the end of the afternoon, and like they have all these little shops there that let you build. And I guess the reason I'm bringing it up, one thing I guess I've noticed is that we've always thought of the Chinese as being a culture of like copiers, because like they'll copy all these things. But actually, what this habit maybe of making some imitations being in like manufacturing is that it's created this this culture of doing and building. And that's why I know a lot of people that have a lot of like manufacturing and tech based in Shenzhen, only because they do have this ability to just build things and make things. And that's actually why I was asking, like, when you said that that you like cooking and that you want to teach people different ways of like cooking as well, it kind of made me think, is she more of like a doer, like a maker, then she just show it out to she like show it out to the world and try to understand what works and what doesn't? Or is she someone that will just second guess herself more? And you did answer that, but I guess in that sense, a place like Shenzhen for me, I love it only because within the context of like Me Inc., they really just go out and do it and try it. And like that's what I love about the place. And like so that's pretty much it. I just want to add that.
Yeah. The interesting thing actually was I only learned how to cook in 2017. Before that, I didn't even know how to boil water. But 2017, basically, I moved out on my own, and packet noodles wasn't doing it for me anymore. So I basically set up a time period where I would always cook one meal a day, and then I would use my Instagram account to keep track of it. And over time, I got better at it. I got more intuitive with how to put the ingredients together. I picked up references on my own. I guess the big thing is there's really no set path to learning. It's not a path of you get a good education, you get a good job, and then you're set. A lot of it is really accepting that it is a continuous path, and people really need to take an active role in how they grow their skills. So for me, I'm glad to say that even though I only started learning in 2017, I had more than 40, I think 50 examples of successes and failures by the end of that year. And then the next year, I doubled it, and then 2 meals a day. And then the next year, I doubled it again. And over time, it became less of a habit or less of something grueling and more of something I was passionate about. It's really the same thing in Shenzhen. The fact that you can get the prototype out there in less than an afternoon is really, it's not about they have the process nobody else does. They built the process because they forced themselves to keep repeating that practice again and again, so that over time the system and the mindset were built up, and over time they got better at it than the other people around them because they already built up a process where they were constantly innovating on what they had.
I think Kathleen, in a sense, and Miguel, with the story on Shenzhen, and even Kathleen's personal story of her rise to cooking stardom, right? There is a lesson already being drawn up, or if you will, an architecture being drawn up of how you can get started producing, engaging, and propelling more me inkers, which is a couple of things. It's a bit like a value chain, you know. You need exposure, so you need an environment where more and more people can get exposed, but exposed not just as passive voyeurs, no, where they can practice. You just kept on practicing, right? As the people in Shenzhen, just as a matter of daily habit, just practice. Practice. Just after a while, it keeps you, it hones you. You learn how to learn in that craft. In cooking, you don't just learn how to cook, you learn how to make mistakes and how to avoid mistakes in cooking. No? So that's just by dint of practice. And if we were to create more me inkers, I think we need to create, people talk about maker spaces, right? Whether that is the case or not, what we need is a space where people can just practice finding problems, practice zeroing in on who owns the
Different
problem,
opportunities.
empathy, and all that. I give you a very rooted example in what's been happening in the past 40 days at ECQ, right? Obviously, it has given a lot of people a lot of time and space, if you will, think about it this way, to expose themselves to something new and to get practiced in it. You could have gotten really good in something in the last 40 days, right? I wonder how many people took advantage of that versus took advantage of finding the next Netflix movie to watch or the next Netflix miniseries to watch. Me Inc. is about giving people, I think, an environment where they can make choices to get exposed, to practice, but and then making them conscious also about the choices they make on what they expose themselves to and how they use their time, right? A case in point is, while I'm not saying that Miguel and I and our team have gotten good at doing these webcasts, before I was about to say before 9/11, before this pandemic happened, I don't think I'd ever done a webcast, right? I'd never gotten in front of camera, but this is
Yeah, me too.
this is now the ninth time we're doing this, and I'd have to say maybe I haven't gotten better at it, but I'm certainly a lot more comfortable doing it. My team has put together something that I hope is more acceptable to the audiences. So we've gotten, in a sense, better by just dint of practice, right? I could have spent my time doing something else. So I think the idea of Me Inc. has to come with, if not maker spaces, practice spaces for whatever it is where like-minded people can practice together, such as what we're doing here. What we're doing here is actually practice problem solving. Go ahead.
Andre, I would like to actually emphasize even more than the practice, it's really about getting the mindset right. So a lot of school systems today focus on teaching students facts, but you don't have an environment where people actively teach young people skills like grit, agility, what an entrepreneurial mindset is made up of, how to push boundaries through your attitude, how do you emotionally regulate. So a lot of those things are actually learned right now through experience.
Yeah.
We experience adversity, we experience challenges. Some people pick up the lesson, some people don't. For me, it's really about looking at ways to systematize what it means
Yeah.
to teach things like empathy and agility and innovation mindset and all those things. And what I think it's really about looking at the learning process as opposed to the teaching process. So you have to evaluate how people are able to learn, how people are able to understand, as opposed to looking at how do you create a certification process or a degree program process and so on. And I feel like this is something that is a big gap in a lot of the society today. We don't learn to learn. We learn so that we can look good, or we learn so that we can get a certification, and that process really needs to be better understood and to be better improved for future generations.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree. I think you bring up a subtle point there, the difference between teaching and learning. I've never been in favor of teaching. I've been in favor of creating learning environments where students can learn to learn for themselves. Because anyway, that's propelling us to a much deeper, probably another 2-3 hour conversation.
I know.
I promised the audience that they would have their turn, and I would like to give the mic first of all to, if she would please speak up. I see her name again, Angela Yu.
Yes.
May we call on you to please share, because you've been very generous with our chat box in terms of your thoughts and ideas. May we invite you to be the first person to share with us your solo workouts. Please, Angela.
Hi, I'm not ready for a video cam right now. Thank you for inviting me. Just for disclosure, I'm the mom of Kathleen. That's how I got into this chat conversation. Anyways, the reason why I'm raising my my ideas is because I feel that a lot of us seem to have a similar trend of thought in terms of the criticality of stepping into the academic or educational system to help them bridge that gap right now. Take advantage actually of the opportunity to rope in parents. Those are our critical stakeholders, and the students. Plus, utilize teachers who may feel the gap and probably might also benefit from the opportunity to. I'm not sure if they will continue to get paid if there's no school around classes.
Angela, let me ask you a question. So, especially as the mother of a incorrigible entrepreneur, right? If you were, Angela, to start a venture right now, who would you pick as a target stakeholder?
As a target stakeholder.
Yeah, and what would their pains be? You did the solo workout, right? You joined us for the solo workout?
Actually, I wasn't intending to join for anything, just to here to listen to the ideas shared, and I sort of got a little bit too liberal with my comments, I guess.
Okay, no, that's fine.
No, perfectly okay.
Perfectly okay. Don't worry. Okay, so again, the floor is open to our audience if they want to share.
Yes, Andre, maybe I can just I like point out like Genesis. You commented on like what Angela said, and like maybe you want to expound a little bit more about what you mean by your hybrid e-learning. delivery structure?
Yeah, so like I was about to follow up to follow
Mhm.
Kath's change of thoughts. Like
Mhm.
like the gap is really like we're teaching students right now, but we're not really putting the me ink like okay, you should be able to learn because like unlike the previous decade, like everything is can be learned under the stand. The challenge right now is how are you going to equitize your value of this thing that you need to learn or do something. So I think Me Inc. is also in the accountability part for you to learn and how are you going to put that learning into value and how you put the value to make an impact. So hybrid e-learning actually is more than like if you guys are familiar with Coursera or
Yeah.
Udemy, like you just sit
Mhm.
there and watch videos, then you earn certificate, right? Like
Mhm.
you study technical skills and how can be a data scientist. But a hybrid e-learning is like it's a mix of like an online classroom, like how you do it in Google Classroom and
Mhm.
like the typical Udemy delivery of courses. However, the gap here is like somebody should be able to guide you. Like, for example, I'm going to learn as a data scientist. It would be great if a data scientist creating the course will be able to guide me throughout the journey of being a data scientist. Like more than the technical skills that I need to learn as a data scientist, like what should be like the mindset for a data scientist and what would be the impact of a data scientist in a community or in current situation. Like actually that's the gap that we are addressing at Sage. So School of Agility, Grit, and Entrepreneurship, where we, equip students more than like the technical skills, what it used to be, that like teach them agility. Like agility is spotting
Mhm.
opportunities and make it like solving and put it into trend. Like there's a trend there. Like how can I make use of this? Grit is more of like having a growth mindset and the resiliency, like falling forward in order for you like not just
Mhm.
survive, but to thrive.
Genesis,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Genesis, can I jump in?
Yeah.
sure.
You talk about two of my favorite topics, actually, grit and agility, right? Well, Miguel's laughing because we practice every day. But so those are two great topics, and I'm glad you're teaching it in Sage. Can you give us a boots on the ground understanding of how you teach something like agility or grit in the context of bringing up a whole new batch of me inkers? How do you teach grit or agility? Take your pick. In
All right.
Sage.
So like for example, like as what I've shared to you earlier, like it takes like someone, for example, a coach for the student to teach this because it takes experience in order for you. You cannot just like learn it from a textbook and like, okay, here are the principles. But if someone could
Let's
share this,
understand that. Genesis, how do you teach grit in Sage? We understand already you can't learn it in a textbook. How do you teach grit in Sage?
actually at Sage, like we offer more than like video courses, but you will be able to have the chance to be mentored by someone who is really an expert, but not just an expert, but who really demonstrated this specific essential skills that we believe. So like you will be coach.
So in Sage, your one of your teaching methodologies is coaching.
Yes, coaching.
Is online coaching. All right. Okay. Um, do
If
you
I
have
may,
any? Yes, please. Go ahead.
well,
Yes,
you're
please.
asking about
Who's that?
agility. Currently, I'm working with an organization to help them sort of fix their system. So in terms of agility, where there's also that shift from setting up the structure of the organization, consistent processes, and having them documented. But at this point in time, what I did was to inject also measures of digitization. So I also sort of channeled their thoughts into how would you want it done such that you don't have to be doing a lot of paperwork. One, number two is also to sort of make data more accessible. So that's one aspect of the agility that I sort of got this organization to think through. In terms of grit, this is a very old practice I had when I was still an entrepreneur before. So normally what I do is I take on a hobby, which is, well, I don't know if you could relate to this. It's cross stitching, but it's a very tedious uh, activity. So you really had to do the needlework for a long time before you eventually get a complete picture, right? So for me, I that's how I train myself on grit, to make sure that I persevere in order to finish something very, very, very tedious and to see a result after that. Okay.
So thanks for that, Angela. I think the what you brought up in these two examples, one agility and the other grit, is practicing it, right? Practicing it, making it happen, actually doing it, and putting it,
Perhaps I'd just like
putting
to add,
yourself in
it's
environment,
deliberate
putting
practice.
yourself in an environment where you can actually practice it, right?
Yeah,
That's
You know,
that's right.
yeah. So go ahead. Mom and daughter are arguing for the mic.
Oh, yeah, forget that. Let's talk about
It's
that.
up to you guys.
sorry. I think it's more deliberate practice, looking
Yeah.
at an opportunity, but also being conscious about how you make mistakes. So, for example, looking at it like learning a guitar, you don't blindly strum the strings, but you look at the form, how you do your finger positioning, how you hold your pick, how you change chords. All of these are small skills that you put together. It basically leads you to playing the guitar well. So it's the same with learning something like grit and agility. A lot of it is looking at an opportunity to do deliberate practice where you constantly reevaluate how you come across, what the situation looks like, and whether you're doing the thing correctly or whether it makes sense. So, for
Yeah.
example, I think something like learning grit. Um, a lot of the times people say, "Oh, this is very advantageous. It's better to be gritty than not gritty." But when you look at certain situations and certain contexts, it's actually more advantageous to be less gritty in certain contexts. So the best people know when to be gritty, when not to be gritty, when to push for a certain outcome, when not to push for a certain outcome. So a lot of it is reading the context that makes the most sense, applying it, and really doing a deliberate practice around the process and around pushing yourself to perform in a certain way.
Kathleen, thanks for bringing that up. I think the notion of deliberate practice, where, as you brought it up, no, which is learning to learn, not just learning how to be good at cross stitching, for example, but learning how to learn faster, learning how to make mistakes, learning how to correct mistakes. I think then if you combine it with Genesis platform of coaching, so the environment for deliberate practice combined with coaching gives people that keen sense of self-awareness about how they're progressing, and again the context. No, so I think a very easy metaphor for this that everyone will understand, if I may fast forward to our Thursday show, which is on teams and peak performance. You know, shades of Me Inc., but more in the context of teams and peak performance and human resources in a corporate setting. One of our guests is the multi-titled basketball coach, who is now the program director of our national basketball team, who when he was first brought in by Ateneo to on his first coaching year, he brought them to the championship. And then he has won 3 successive basketball championships, has been the head coach of New Zealand, Lebanon. So what you will find is this rubric of when you have, what does a basketball team do? They have a coach. In this case, they have a lot of coaches focused on different aspects, and then they practice a lot. They practice a lot, right? You can't learn and get great at basketball or grit or agility by reading it in a book or by just being coached. You have to do deliberate practice, and then have the feedback loops. And so we will learn and deconstruct what the success factors are that we can draw from something like sports, which is wonderful because it's very measurable, right? You either win or you lose. You either score more points or you don't. More rebounds, less turnovers, and so on and so forth. And you can see deliberately how each Coach Tab likes to say that their own competition is themselves. They don't compete with other teams. So how do you bring that mentality? I figure that a lot of our Me Inc. Quest here has to do with the same mentality of continuous learning and putting yourself in that environment where primarily by deliberate practice, you learn to get better and better and better and faster at getting better at something. And that is probably the core skill set of Me Inkers. And if we want to be able to bring up a generation of Filipino Me Inkers, we've got to create environments. It's the same thing. If we want to get good at basketball, we've got to create an environment where more kids can practice basketball deliberately. There's just no magic to it, right? So in terms of new ventures in the new normal to generate and nurture more Me Inkers, I have to say, what is a basketball camp? It's environments where kids can practice. We need Filipino professionals to be able to practice agility, grit, empathy, doing and learning to do rather than overthinking things, and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
Juan,
Andre, yeah.
May I add? Sorry, Andre, Roger, can I add
Roger,
to
yes.
the discussion?
I'd like to welcome you back. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I really like what the discussion is about grit. And funny enough, this is what we teach in preschool because unfortunately, you cannot learn this when you're already an adult. The muscle has not been developed. So when we teach grit, we actually don't teach it as a lesson. We teach it as a series of genome, if you want. So we broke it up to GRIT. So if you're a teacher in my school, you're gonna have to learn how to use this in the classroom. So the genome, the RNA or DNA is GRIT. So the first is you can teach kids what is called the growth mindset, the belief that they're in control of their destiny, they can be better than what they are, this so-called not yet mindset. So that one can have a lot of lesson on that, you know. So what can you do now? What else can you do? Do you think you can do it? And if they start learning, say, not yet, but I can, then you're really getting into the first genome. The second part of grit to me is R. We teach that also. First, you teach teachers how to teach, not to teach, but to have it caught in the classroom. Resilience mindset. Resilience is not just a belief, it's the conviction that you can thrive under any condition in spite of drawbacks, setbacks, or limitations. This is very easy to teach to the kids. When you give them something to draw, you give them something very difficult, you could see the way they will give up, not give up. If they made a mistake, they push somebody, we make that as an opportunity to teach them, you know. So that's a setback. You broke your relationship. So what do you need to say? Why do you need to say that? Instead of saying, don't do it again. So we're really teaching them the genome of the R. And then when we talk about the I is intentionality. And I'm glad you mentioned basketball because the third genome element is the practice of being purposeful and laser focused. If you can teach kids about that. So when they're doing a lesson, when they're reading, you look at the eyes, you let them follow, and then you ask them to continue the story, and you will be amazed because they're focused on the story, they become the story, and then eventually they get it. So we call that intentionality. So you teach them that ability to don't blink, don't give up, because kids will easily give up, short attention span, and say, come on, Roger, we can do this, right? If you're ready, I want to go back to you. If not, come sit beside me while I talk to the others. Is that okay? When you're ready, you tell me, just tap my shoulder, and we're back. And the third genome is what we call tenacity. It's actually
Fourth.
the habit. The fourth is the tenacity. I just want to complete that. We teach our kids, don't give up until you have achieved your goal. And how do you attach that to entrepreneurship? Once a year, we do a Christmas bazaar, but we make it into a big event where they have to look at what they can have. What can you draw? What arts that you like in the last 6 months? Can you make something out of it? Then we will sell it. We will make it into a business. And then you will invite your parents, your friends, and then your teacher will help you make it creative. And then we're going to sell it to each other and to our friends, our parents. And the money we use, we will donate it to children in a hospice or in an orphanage that you will choose, and they will come. You know, if you follow my story, that's actually a whole lesson on grit. But guess what? You cannot teach it in one lesson. There's got to be a context. So for me, when you teach grit, it's really a culture, an environment. So my challenge to organization is, are you building a gritty organization? Do you allow your leaders to practice that? So when you go back, to me, grit is really a whole set of attitudes.
Roger.
Yeah, that's
Roger.
it.
Roger, you're trapped in that familiar trance, like you're in your own zone, which is great. I love your sharing. My challenge for you is to rechannel that challenge, because if we just challenge corporations, walang mangyayari dyan. My challenge to you is to challenge people like you and me and Genesis and Kathleen and Miguel to come up with ventures that will help corporations get this done, right? Or for that matter, when you describe how you're teaching grit through a combination of practice and intentionality to kids, I would submit to you that there are thousands of Filipino professionals who need the same children's lessons, right? On grit. So why we should really open up an academy that delivers this to professionals, because this is what we need in the workplace. We need more people who are able to practice and live grit, because there are so many problems out there that require, where the market demands grit, G-R-I-T, as you call them. No? So I would not challenge corporations to do this. I would challenge, and this is the essence of 100-hour Launchpad. No? It is not to abdicate through our own opinion the responsibility to the outside world to act on what we're talking about here. 100-hour Launchpad is to take responsibility for the problems and the opportunities that were surfaced here. No? That is why we attach, for example, an investment fund. If you're willing to walk your talk, we are willing to invest in you, right? And put you in touch with our corporate partners, our strategic partners, to make things happen, right? So that's what I meant at the beginning of the show when I said, in 100-hour Launchpad, we are not interested in experts or pundits or fancy opinions. We are only interested in people who want to solve problems, not talk about them, solve problems. So that's why we invited Genesis, Kathleen, and you, because you are problem solvers. You are a wonderful testament. 60 hours. I think I'm going to rename this show 60-hour Launchpad, the Roger edition. The Roger edition for pros, for pro professionals only. Right? But no, the point is we've got to cascade in a practical way all these things that we're talking about. I think the market is ripe for this. People need this. Miguel, what are we seeing? Hey, here's my good friend Gabby Severino. Gab, do you want to grab the mic? And I'm not able to follow the chat box, but if you'd like to, we'd like to hear your voice and what you have to say about this.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
Yeah.
Can everyone hear me? Wait,
yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. I'm just I just planned also to follow everything and listen and try to learn. But I guess what I'm seeing also, and also my question all the time is how to to cascade this to the masses, to change. Because us educated people, yes, we know about empathy, we know about grit, we know about all the characteristics that can help us become good people. But how do we cascade this down the line? Yes, I know that the educators are wanting you start preschool, you start with the families. I heard a lot of good ideas about that. I think that is a big question that we have. How do we change our? Because when we change that, then we change our voting thinking. Then we change our leaders. Then we change everything. Now we're trying to, as part of Coach Tab's coaching staff, we also try to create not just good basketball players, but good citizens also. So we're trying to change that. We're trying to teach grit. We're trying to teach empathy in our program also. That's our way of helping. That's our way of helping in a very non-essential industry, which is sports. But like I said in my comment, that's why I like sports, because it is a good teaching situation that's very controlled. Thanks for having me again.
Thank you, Gab. That's why we're having Coach Tab and you guys know the team on Thursday, because we can very well sure how you do grit and all these good stuff, peak performance, in sports. What Gabby is going into is an example of what we do here, which is he's zoning in on a target stakeholder. We've tended to talk about grit and me Inc. in somewhat abstractions. What Gabby is saying is, okay, I have a very specific target stakeholder for me Inc., which is very challenging, right? The masses. In other words, the lower socioeconomic classes that did not grow up with this kind of roots. In 60 seconds, if I may, I can give you a very grounded story on this. So one of the companies that we invest in, actually several companies are in this same boat, but I'll just use one. The case of Zenia. It's a healthcare and home wellness app. The first and biggest vertical is massage. So they've created basically an Uber platform for home massage, where if you want a therapist, they have them. All the feedback, 5 stars are there. We could be serving in Zenia 10 times the demand easily, but we cannot find supply. Even though Zenia creates opportunities in the range of 30 to 40 to 50,000 pesos of income for therapists, right? There is a lot of pitfalls there and mines that allow. In other words, Zenia is a platform for me inkers in this space, but we can't find enough me inkers to serve demand, which could have been 10 times that. So imagine those income streams, 30 to 50,000 pesos, for who are largely 80% of Zenia therapists are single women, right? So this is an example of the masses that Gabby's talking about. How do you inculcate and create environments for them where they can, in fact, not just learn, but apply and live grit? Because without grit, guess what? The demand side opportunity is not going to be fully addressed. Sayang when people don't have grit. It's worth solving, and we are next week, actually this week. In fact, I don't know if my team has already launched it, but we are launching a venture that is, again, focusing on this question, on this stakeholder that Gabby mentioned. How do you create career paths of growth for the lower socioeconomic classes, especially those ones who are getting laid off or losing their jobs in this pandemic? So we have a venture that will onboard them. The companies who are laying off will offboard them to us. We onboard them, and then within 24 hours, we put them in a career track with income streams that give them the ability, a chance, within 24 hours to earn as much as double minimum wage. And we have 10,000 of these jobs available to be filled. So these are obviously you can't just offboard them into these opportunities. We have to train them and onboard them on things like grit. And we can't train them in theory. They have to be able to live it. So when we talk about Me Inc. ventures in the new normal, we have to think about what can we as entrepreneurs offer the market, whether it's this mass market, whether it's a more professional class market, whether it's the corporate market, so that more and more Filipino professionals up and down the socioeconomic ranks behave this way. Because if more and more of us behave this way, we can solve more problems. Yeah, sorry about that. Who's next?
Sorry, Andre, I just wanted to jump in on
Please.
this psychological study of happiness from Martin Seligman. So Martin Seligman is actually the mentor of Angela Duckworth, who pioneered the concept of grit. And what he realized over years and years of studying what makes people engaged and happy with their work was that there was a lot more to happiness beyond feeling happy or feeling satisfied over something. And the deepest and most difficult to reach was really the meaning component of happiness, where people could basically look at what they did and how they grew up, how they run their routines every day and feel connected to a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose with what they're doing. I think for me, a lot of what it means to reorient the masses or everyday people to this new ideology or this new way of thinking is to look at it as really less about going to work to make money or to get influence, but more of how can you create purpose and exponentiate purpose through the meaning that you create both for yourself and for others. And for me, fundamentally, that is what Me Inc. should be about. We have to actively train our young people to want to look and to want to pursue this meaning, because it's something that makes the things we do more meaningful on a higher level and more fruitful for a lot of us. It's less about going to work to follow a 9 to 5 or to understand what your boss is saying. It's more about
Yeah.
how do you create meaning with what you do, and how do you create meaning in others through what you're doing.
Well, very well said, Kathleen. You sound like one of us in Ignite. That's actually the essence of the three-letter word or acronym that we call GPS, right? Genius, purpose, and service, or meaning and purpose, as you call it, is your navigation system for continuously finding growth, purpose, meaning, and service in your life by reflecting on both your gifts, what makes you a force for good in the world, being very connected to that in an honest way, as opposed to, for example, looking at what you don't have or what other people have that you don't have, is really being very connected to yourself and to your gifts that make you a force for good in the world. And then also connecting to your pains. You know, what pains have you experienced in life that have given you more empathy, more compassion, and able to give more love. And then service to whom, right? So these are the components that then triangulate into what problems do you want to solve. Because when you talk about grit, think about it. You brought it up so beautifully. Grit is not always good. What makes grit good is if we are gritting out things that connect with our meaning and purpose. And in fact, we don't have to say that. If we find meaning and purpose in what we're doing, we will grit it out. But if we're doing something that doesn't mean anything to us, it's just a paycheck or it's for status, then that's where grit fails us, right? So there is a deeper root to grit, which is who are you, why are you here, and what is your purpose in life? And that's why actually we went back to that question before we did the solo workout, a second time. I wonder if anybody here had a change of heart in terms of the zones of opportunity that they identified after they went through the GPS questions. Or does anybody want to add anything? Anybody else from our chat box that we should be calling up?
Andre, I would like to add, like, unlike the Me Inc. part, like,
Who's this? Genesis? Yes.
yeah, this is me. This is Genesis. So the Me Inc. should be like, you should be able to, you know, train yourself with the ability to persist in something you feel passionate about and persevere. So even when you face obstacles, because like right now, we cannot, like what happened to the crisis and the pandemic, this is really an ever changing future. Like we need to, like if you have this Me Inc. mindset, you should be enable yourself with the driver of achievement and success. That's why we talk about grit, and it should be like independent of and beyond what skills and intelligence should be able to contribute. But it is more than a talent, nothing more of like a potential also. Like if you can see this like mindset of Me Inc., it should be, you should train yourself with it as an ability.
Thank you, Genesis. On that note, we'd like to invite, we've come up to the 2-hour mark of this 2-hour webcast, which is the 2 hours to begin our 100-hour Launchpad. Our wish, again, is that you will translate this into something that you will actually act on. It is 7 days ago to this day, so last Tuesday, when we came upon a zone of opportunity in a Launchpad session just like this. And I believe today or yesterday, we would have launched the venture already that sprinted that opportunity, which we hope will result to begin with in the next couple of weeks in 10,000 jobs with a shot at twice minimum wage. No? So this is what these 2-hour Launchpad challenges are for. On this note, I would like to give the stage with thanks to Genesis for taking his turn. Now to Roger for his parting words and what he's going to take away and build from this 100-hour Launchpad challenge. Roger, tell us.
Andre, my takeaway is actually very profound. I realized that if you channel your GPS to helping those who need it most, I think the significance is higher. The challenge you pose, which is how do you teach grit to the masses of people who are psychologically disenfranchised, who are living, day to day, not knowing what tomorrow is. How do you make them celebrate that one that made them survive or thrive in this crisis, and actually teach them that they can live grit every day? I think that's a very interesting challenge. The fact that you said, if we can do this, you're willing to fund it, we're willing to do it together. To me, that's a big realization. If we can do what we're doing for corporate and give it to the most number of people, I think it's gonna be more impactful and will benefit those who actually suffered most during COVID. Because many of the things that I just want to say this, many of us will still survive in this, especially organizations, companies, but there are some human being souls that will be crushed. And so how do you rebuild that? That to me is even more important than how do you get back to your revenue. I think the profound thing I found out is you got to help people recover their self-worth after this crisis.
I just need to respond to that, Roger. So thank you for your sharing and for that sharing the way it touched you. No, I just want to say that I want to connect what you said with what Kathleen said. If we are to teach grit in a way that where these masses can practice them and live them out in their daily lives. It can't be grit that we teach them. It has to be connecting them to their sense of meaning and purpose. Nobody's going to be gritty about a life that doesn't hold meaning and purpose. So first and foremost, fundamentally, it's connecting people to a sense of purpose. Actually, when somebody is connected to their sense of meaning and purpose, you know what? You don't have to teach them a lot of things. That person will figure things out. So the root of everything is meaning and purpose. Now, when you talk about the challenge of doing it for these masses, you're right. I mean, not only are we willing to fund it, we are already funding several of these ventures. I shared with you, there's Kuya, there's Zenia. This is a tougher challenge than we all think. It is very difficult because of so much ingrained in these this target demographic. It is so difficult. Like I told you, they are already being given 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 a month income. That is transformational. That will change their entire lives. And yet we cannot find enough of them or hold on to enough of them. And I tell you, the founder behind it really has his heart and soul trying to fix this problem. It is not easy, but it's worth fighting for, to your point, Roger. Thank you for that. Thank you for joining us. Last word, our lady, Kathleen. What are you going to take away from this? What are you going to build?
I think for me, it's just about keep moving forward. From this conversation, it's really about looking at how we can be a vehicle to change and to evolve the societies and structures we have now, and to be brave enough to really take the first step to creating those things. And for me, what I'm passionate about is new ideas, new ways of doing things, and really an opportunity like this doesn't come every day. It's, in a sense, a good crisis. The goodness of the crisis doesn't negate the pain, but it also gives us an opportunity to reframe how we think of crisis like this when it happens, as a chance to turn things around and really reshape the world we live in for the better.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you for your mother for being with us, Angela, also. Okay, so on that note, Miguel, do you have a wrap for us?
Sorry, Andre, what is that?
Yeah, did you want to say anything before we wrap this up?
Well, yeah, you know, for me, it's really something around, what do you call this? The thing about being a me inker, and I guess something that I've seen, you know, aside from being a educator, and, you know, doing a lot of consultancy work, you know, around innovation, is that maybe I wouldn't say skills, but more of instincts that I wish more me inkers, actually, I wish most people had more. We're really, I guess, this instinct of constantly asking questions, which should be rooted on, you know, on like on deep empathy, compassion, meaning and purpose, and also at the same time seeing grit and like prototyping as an instinct as well, as something that, you know, that just comes naturally to the way that, you know, to the way that you learn. I mean, I love our whole discussion around continuous learning. I mean, if there's anything that I see, the way we teach people in the school setting right now is that it's very silo to the classroom, and, you know, there has to be this conscious, I guess, effort to, you know, to see that learning is continuous. Having this learning mindset is very important, and especially for me inkers in that sense as well. So again, the ability to question, making that an instinct as well, and, you know, seeing everything as a learning opportunity.
Thank you, Miguel. So now we've come to the conclusion. I'd just like to wrap up with you by, what we experienced today has a rhyme and reason and a method behind it. So we wanted you to experience it rather than to start with a framework. But at this point, if you allow me a quick minute, Houston, can we show our pizza pie, please? Just the pizza pie diagram of the 4 restart streams. We want to share this with you. It's a reconstruction of what we've been experiencing throughout this session. We call these the 4 restart streams, 4RS. And to be perfectly honest with you, what we really call them is the 4 growth streams. But as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I've been having some arguments with people about whether growth is relevant. I think it's a matter of semantics. So we talk about restarting. What we experienced today in the last 2 hours is actually these streams fusing with each other. No? First and foremost, it is customer science. What is that? We didn't call it that way, but when we talk about target stakeholders, what their pains are, what our vision of impact is for them, that to us is essence of customer science. And if we are to restart in this pandemic, we better be able to practice regularly, constantly, and up and down our ranks, this customer science that we were experiencing today. Purpose science, as Kathleen so eloquently put it, is instilling meaning and purpose in the lives of people. This is not something you go through once. This is something like basketball skills you practice every day. You get better at connecting with your purpose, with your genius, your purpose, and your service, as we call it. So, and then infused in that is this thing we call collaboration science. One thing I would have liked to show you is in our application, in our digital app, when you keep on answering your GPS, every time you answer, give us a data point about your GPS, we run algorithms and we pair you up with people that you should be collaborating with. Think about it. LinkedIn connects people based on industries and functions. Wouldn't it be better if we connected people based on shared values, meaning, and purpose? That's what we do in Ignite, which then propels us to the innovation science. People collaborating and working together in order to solve problems, in order to output ideas and opportunities into living, breathing realities. No? So this is what we call the 4 restart streams, and this is what we gave you a taste of to practice today. Next slide, please. So we are well aware. Can we get the SAS slide, please? All right. So next week we are introducing. We have launched. This would be I've lost count. Probably we're on our 10th solution since this lockdown started. Every one of them has been free. This is going to be our first for sale, if you will, solution. It's Restart as a Service. These are 24/7 practices. They are not lectures. They are not reading materials. They are practices that will allow organizations to start 100, or 10,000 people in the new normal. We are pricing it at the giveaway price of $988 per person per month. It is a 3-month subscription, and you can power it on this subscription in 60 seconds. So again, when we take this through the discipline that we just went through, who is our target stakeholder for this? It is very much the business leaders, CEO, 1 down, 2 down, 3 downs that we have served all along. What are their pains? They're going to have to restart their business. They're going to have to create capabilities up and down their ranks to fix their value chain and to fix their finances. And we want to be able to give them the practices that allow them to take care of their people, who will take care of their operations, of their supply chain, of their accounting, of their sales, of their marketing. No? So again, RAS is simply an extension, week after week, day after day, for 3 months of the same experiences that we simulated today. So I hope you'll forgive that little plug. I think it gives a fuller picture as to what this experience is all about. With that, I thank Roger, Kathleen, and Genesis again for lending us their expertise and being very game challengers today, as well as our audience for their participation. This has been 100-Hour Launchpad. Miguel and I will be signing off, but as always, we are happy to remain behind the scenes here for anyone who wants to chat us up. Just stay around, we'll be here, and we're happy to chat. Thank you, good afternoon, and keep launching.